Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Anomaly Sea Ice Challenge with the transhumanist paragons of Pandroth. Last time we left off, after taking care of 2 mech clusters, we completed the Anomaly Entity Codex by planting a Harbinger tree, and the Corrupted Obelisk created a clone of Ellie. Regarding the doppelganger's name, I actually dug through the entire list of Patreon and YouTube supporters in the naming rights tier and above, and I stumbled across this one, Orley, which I feel could be reasonably construed to sound similarly, while still being its very own distinct name. So Ellie and Orley now together on the sea ice, and the big plan for today is to activate the Void Monolith and bring about the Anomaly endgame scenario, but before we do that we need to prepare a bit. After ingesting 2 death rest capacity serums, Vulik begins an early death rest so that he is fresh and ready once things get interesting, and as you can see we are also investing in some defenses made from sturdy plasteel this time. Ghoul CJ receives plating and barbs for that extra combat power, while our builders get all of those new walls up as quickly as possible. Shortly after, we are then struck by an eclipse, which will put a damper on our food and drug production, but should only last a few hours. From the crashed shuttle we defended last episode, we can also grab some valuables, most notably the 2 Doomsday rocket launchers our enemies left behind. Then, all of a sudden, just as we begin work on the northern defenses, a Noctosphere appears, and I kid you not, just a few seconds earlier, off screen I was thinking to myself how useful one could be for that final fight, and well, here it is. Now, it will take a little while studying it, but with a bit of luck, we should be able to send it out against our foes just in time. The northern defenses, then made of steel and quickly erected, and after studying the Noctosphere only once, we are already informed of research progress. Looks like we know what we're doing by now. The darkness also teaches us that maybe some additional power could be useful, so we're putting up 3 new wind turbines here, as both the Grey Pall and Unnatural Darkness events would impact our solar production, and who knows whether or not we're about to encounter one of those. All of a sudden then, the pit gate rumbles, a bit of a wrench in our plans to peacefully prepare and gather our strength before the final fight, but what can you do? Time to test out the new defenses. The setup here is the one that has been tried and tested numerous times before. Ghoul melee blockers in front, a row of grenadiers behind, and all the firepower we can muster to fill out the back ranks. For the most part, this should work nicely. We probably could have benefited from a few more melee fighters protecting our shooters here, as Maniac is currently the only one running around taking care of finger spikes being launched behind our lines. This results in a few, perhaps avoidable bites and bruises to Lauren, but other than that, the fight still goes very well, and apart from Ghoul Kelly going down, we don't really have any severe injuries to report. While capturing a tough spike, Ellie then gets attacked by a lone survivor that I apparently overlooked. Not ideal, but she will recover. In the meantime, Ghoul Bert receives 2 power claws, courtesy of Dr. Nightshade. A few hours later it is CJ's turn, and with that, our Ghoul police should be sufficiently well armed for the big fight up ahead. Then a lone ghoul attacks us, not quite sure what a mark here is all about, but Jay reaches him first and one-shots him, so I would say our ghouls are ready. But there is one more thing we need to take care of, just so the pit gate does not interrupt the grand finale at the worst possible moment, and of course I am talking about taking out the Dreadmelt. Once again, this shouldn't be too difficult, even though a bit more space in between our ghouls and our shooters probably would have protected the latter a bit better. This way we once again suffer a few avoidable injuries. Especially Kojiro gets hit quite a few times here, but that's nothing that a coagulate couldn't fix. Still, I did get a bit careless there. Let's hope we can get it together once we activate the monolith. Now, with all remaining valuables grabbed from the pit gate, we make our escape, and before we can watch it collapse behind us, we finally complete Ultra MechTech. This now unlocks some truly high-level mechanoids, as well as some useful gear and gadgets. We'll talk more about those shortly. For now, let's continue with marine armor and queue up the gestation of a Centurion, a heavy defensive-focused mechanoid that comes with a shield and sort of serves as a mobile defense platform. It'll take several days for it to finish though, so in the meantime, with the pit gate already collapsed, let's get to it. We bring our deep drill inside so that any entities do not destroy it, then we wait out an unfortunately timed mental break for Karen, and then it's time, let's have Elpis awaken the monolith. Doing so is an irreversible decision. It will engulf the colony in darkness for several days and attract all sorts of entities. This will be a lengthy challenge, potentially the hardest endgame scenario in the game, so let us stay true to our series motto and live, love and provoke the void one final time. Alright, the sky darkens and the monolith begins to awaken. As you can imagine, the first round of combat is imminent, so let's assemble our troops and watch as void structures plunge down onto the sea ice. Just 2 of them for now, and also right next to each other, although that doesn't really make too much of a difference. These void structures are protected by a large number of metalhorrors, and we will need to activate them both in order to continue the quest. That obviously requires taking out the metalhorrors first, but for now we will leave them be and worry about a much more pressing threat. We've got flesh beasts incoming. Yes, another round, and one more reason why I really did not appreciate the pit gate spitting out some earlier, but we should be able to handle them just like we already did with the first group. Since they're digging up from all over the map, they should hopefully also not arrive all at the same time, and as long as we keep our entry open here, they should still move towards this spot and not bashing our walls. We have fortified our position a bit more this time around. Not only do we have slightly more melee presence protecting our shooters and grenadiers, but Diabolus Cursebane is also standing tall in the middle of our squad, ready to launch its devastating Hellsphere cannon. That, together with the constant chucking of grenades, should hopefully make quick work of any cluster of flesh beasts lingering in the area for too long, and if it doesn't, we still have Elpis in the back ready to launch Vertigo and Berserk pulses. So far though, I have to say, despite our walls getting absolutely battered, we're doing pretty well for ourselves. Friendly fire has been minimal so far, that's something I was afraid of. The ghouls are striking with all their might. We haven't had too many flesh beasts vault past the front of melee blockers to attack anyone behind, and the worst of the attack already seems to be over. A short while later then, and indeed here we are. This is looking very good for now, considering that we're only getting things started. Most of the injuries are to ghouls or to pawns that will rapidly recover, so I'd rate this a solid first fight. Unfortunately, there are many more still to come, and they won't all be quite so straightforward. Now, with the metal horrors staying put near the void structures, there is no need to keep fighting immediately, so let's invest some time into repairs and cleanup. There will be other entities roaming the map from now on, Gorehulks and Noctols mostly, but they will not attack unless we present them with a clear target. Just keeping our doors shut will be enough for them not to threaten us. A few hours later then, it's time to battle some metal horrors. We send out a small detachment here to lure in one of the 2 groups. We could probably take both at the same time, but let's play it safe here. For this one, there is no need to go all out with Cursebane the Diabolus though, and at least initially we are also holding off on the Grenadiers. The group is not big enough for that to be truly necessary. Eventually though, Slaves Amal and the 2 children, Corinna and Roman, move in to help out, and shortly after, the first batch of metal horrors is defeated. So far so good, this was not really all that challenging, but let's still wait a little while for our ghouls to recover before we strike the second group. Orley suffers an unfortunate Noctol strike early on, just as we exit the base a second time, but we are rewarded for our sacrifice by some unexpectedly quick study progress on the Noctosphere, which can now already be used against our enemies. That might come in handy, but not against the metalhorrors, which are efficiently lured back to our base and then promptly greeted with ghouls, grenades and gunfire. The only major issue in this fight is Maniac getting himself caught in melee against several metalhorrors and suffering plenty of injuries. A last-second skip from Elpis prevents the worst from happening, but even with the super-fast wound healing gene, this could take a while to recover from. Definitely pretty inconvenient and an oversight on my part. The rest of the fight, meanwhile, is smooth sailing. Elpis is dropping a few vertigo pulses on the metalhorrors just to distract them and to keep the pressure off of our ghouls, who, with all of their upgrades, comfortably outclass any metalhorror put in front of them. So here we are then. Both void structures lie mostly unprotected, but once again we want to make sure to repair all damages first before continuing our quest. The fact that both Maniac and Orley have injuries to recover from also needs to be accounted for, but still, even with both of them not fully recovered, we set up our team once more just a few hours later. This time, though, we need someone to interact with one of the void structures, and Elpis makes for a good candidate, not only because he's our leader, but also because he's able to skip across the sea ice without any of the entities roaming the area able to catch him. Both of these void structures now need to be manually activated to progress the quest. Activation takes a little over 30 seconds, but can be interrupted and continued later if something comes up. Something coming up could, for example, be entities attacking Elpis, against which we can easily protect our young prodigy with the invisibility psycast. Lasting for 12 seconds, 3 of these will suffice to allow him to activate the void structure in peace. So, there we go, void structure number 1 activated, and at this point it is very important that we do not immediately do the same for the other one. The reason why becomes obvious as Elpis skips himself back home. Activating a void structure will trigger a large-scale entity attack. In this case, we've got gore hulks coming in from the east, shamblers and gore hulks from the northeast, more gore hulks from the northwest, and another mixed group in the southwest. Now, on the surface, this may not look like much, but the big problem here are actually the shamblers. The gore hulks can very reliably be lured into our defenses, whereas the shamblers are a bit more mindless, if you will, and will simply bash in the first wall they come across. This is why we deploy the Noctosphere against that group to the southwest to hopefully keep them busy, while we prepare for the gore hulks to attack our position. I'll be honest though, I really do not like this mix of entities. Gore hulks are really the only entity with a somewhat capable ranged attack, and I have a pretty bad feeling about the shamblers too, but I suppose we can only wait and see how this goes. Unsurprisingly, we are going all out for this one, and those shamblers that did not get distracted by the Noctosphere are in fact running right into our defenses, so that's good. Now we only need to outlast the onslaught. Right, so Ghoul Kelly goes down, this time for good. Let's hope that we don't cause too much of an inferno here with Cursebane's Hellsphere Cannon, because as long as her body remains intact, we can bring her back. Lauren has made a few Ghoul Resurrection Serums before kicking off the action. The real problem, however, just as I had feared, those shamblers coming from the north currently destroying our walls. The Noctosphere is also about to return to us in a few seconds, and I have to admit its effectiveness in this fight was underwhelming to say the least. The only thing working somewhat reliably up until now was our defensive setup, and even that has now come to an end as we need to sally to engage those remaining gore hulks and to lure the shamblers away from our walls. And this is probably the point where the fight slips away from us a little bit. The shamblers have already breached our base, and all of a sudden our defenses and all of those little choke points are now working against us. Not to mention that, as powerful as they are, our ghouls are moving fairly slowly because of their upgrades, their injuries and the hypothermia slowly creeping in. All in all, not the best conditions for a close quarters fight against 50-odd shamblers, especially if you also consider that we want to move as quickly as possible here to avoid the loss of valuable items and furniture. Still, it seems like some casualties are unavoidable. Thankfully, it's only Maniac in this case, who is deathless and goes into a coma instead of outright dying, but that's probably a result of those injuries he suffered earlier at the hands of the metalhorrors, an oversight that now comes back to bite us. Lifterbot Frelock is then next to go down, eagerly trying to help out and unfortunately getting caught in the crossfire. Nonetheless, I think we are slowly getting the situation back under control. One last push into the Arco Temple then to clear out the last shamblers and to protect that legendary meditation throne that Kojiro made last episode. At the end of the fight though, we've got almost all of our pawns in various states of injury, definitely in no shape to continue the fight anytime soon. The big issue at this point is that upon activating a void structure, the entities attacking us are chosen at random, so we could see the same enemy composition a second time, or something entirely different. That does not necessarily mean it's going to be better though. While I would prefer a makeup of purely melee entities, several groups of devourers, for example, could cause serious problems too. So all things considered, I think it would be best to just sit tight for a while here, while we patch up all of the holes in our walls and all of those injuries too. As you can see, mood is also becoming a somewhat troubling factor, enough to send Orle into an Entity Slayer mental break. Obviously we can't have that, not only because she might accidentally target the Noctosphere, but also because we are relying on all of our recent captures to produce precious bioferrite, so we're quickly putting her behind bars. Vulek has some experience handling her, or at least someone very much like her. In the early morning hours, Corinna can chuck some Molotov cocktails to burn the corpse pile in front of our door. While it probably doesn't move the needle too much, it all adds to our colony wealth, and that is high enough as it is already, slowly approaching 400,000 silver. Not to mention that a death pall could reanimate all of these bodies, something we definitely do not need to see. A short while later then, Elpis ventures out onto the sea ice once more to activate the second void structure. Yes, I know, we still have a few injured among our colonists, but I'm simply hoping for a more manageable mix of enemies that does not put any of our people in harm's way. Once again, we use Elpis's invisibility psycast to keep him hidden from the Noctols and Gore Hulks roaming the area, and about 30 seconds later the void structure is activated. Elpis skips back home, where the full force of ghouls, mechs and colonists is already standing by, and we eagerly await the arrival of this next wave of entities. And here it is, and I can honestly say I have never been so relieved to see Noctols. While there may be several groups of them, for a total of about 75 individuals, I feel like this should be much more manageable compared to the Shamblers and Gore Hulks from the previous assault. The main factor here is probably that the Noctols are smart enough to actually come after our colonists as long as a path is available, and since that means that they'll run right into everything we have prepared for them, we gladly make one available. So then, let the carnage unfold, I'd say. We're dropping everything we have on them here, including Berserk and Vertigo Pulses, and soon learn that it's not just Noctols that have arrived. Emerging from the shadows are Sight Stealers, and most likely a good number of them, but thankfully they too are simple-minded melee creatures that will gladly run right into our inferno as long as we allow them to. Most importantly though, both Noctols and Sight Stealers are not exactly heavily armored and therefore pretty easy to take down with all of those explosives. All in all, I have a very good feeling about this. As you can see, especially Diabolus Cursebane is wreaking absolute havoc with the Hellsphere cannon. I was actually debating the creation of a second one, but then decided in favor of a Centurion just to have a bit more variety. Eventually then we pick off the last few stragglers. Yes, there are several more Noctols on the map, but those are the ones just roaming around. The ones actively coming for us are now all defeated. We can even capture a few of them to increase our bioferrite production, and then we need to talk about the next steps. Now, very importantly, at this point, the activation of the second void structure has triggered a 2-day cooldown. After those 2 days, more void structures will appear. I don't consider this a spoiler, as the game clearly already states this. With those void structures, we will then need to repeat what we have done to the 2 already present, which means the entity onslaught is far from over. This is also why I consider the anomaly ending to be amongst the hardest in the game. Yes, launching the ship reactor or going for the Royal Ascent prompts continuous raids, but those can be planned for and don't differ too much from the attacks your colony sees on a regular basis throughout the rest of the game, whereas the anomaly ending throws entities at you in numbers and combinations that you have likely never fought before. But that's the beauty of it all, isn't it? After all, Pete Complete is all about embracing the challenge. Our colony, meanwhile, is all about embracing the void, which will now provide us with a bit of happiness. Young Roman here can quickly perform a pleasure pulse ritual all by himself. The 9 days will hopefully more than suffice, and this should raise everyone's moods a bit, an area that we are currently struggling in a bit, understandable considering what our pawns have been through. While the ritual is underway, we also complete the research of marine armor. I would actually love to continue with Cataphract now, but sadly we are lacking the second tech print, and the chances of a caravan or trade ship stopping by that has it for sale are rather slim at this point. So instead I think we'll just hold off on research entirely for the moment. This gives our pawns a bit of free time to take care of repairs and cleanup around the base. We want to be well prepared once that cooldown reaches 0 and the next set of void structures appears. However, with the pleasure pulse now complete, I would say that we save that last chapter of the Anomaly endgame for the next and probably final episode. Allow me to use this time to briefly plug our Polar Bears International fundraiser. Over the course of this series, we have raised over $5,000 for a cause that is close to my heart and very fitting for a CI series. And who knows, maybe we can push to 6,000 in time for the grand finale. Wouldn't that be awesome? You can find all info in the little box next to or underneath the video, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please leave a thumbs up if you did, it really helps me out. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, you can also subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, become a channel member here on YouTube, or support me over on Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.